Hey guys, welcome to the latest episode of Beyond the Tape, a podcast that focuses on Australians doing rad things in the mountain bike industry, whether that's media, athletes, event organisers, whoever. Actually, before we move on too far, I am kind of trying to find an athlete manager. Turns out they're very rare in Australia. So if you guys know anyone or you're listening, please drop us a message or send us an email and we'll get something sorted. Anyway, this episode we're chatting with Jared Rando. He is one of Australia's OG downhillers, raced way back in the day since the wheels invented pretty much. It's got a bunch of stories and he's also been the coach of the World Champs team. He's done a lot of stuff for Australian mountain biking. So I was sick to have him on and chat about a bunch of things. Before we move on too far though, let's chat about our sponsors. First up, we've got the Trek Rail. This e-bike is goddamn beautiful. Everything is tucked in nicely. It's super sleek and barely even looks like it's got a motor in it. As a media guy, or pretending to be a media guy with a big heavy camera bag and carrying a lot of shit around and doing a lot of Ks in some of the races and stuff, e-bikes are absolutely amazing. If you're under a time crunch, or you just don't have 3 hours to go and do 20 Ks, e-bikes are amazing, and the rail handles and feels exactly like your acoustic bike. If you are on your acoustic bike and you need to manage some energy, I was talking about this on Instagram the other day, something like a Wahoo Element from FE Sports is amazing. If you're like me and you don't have much time in the day to go through and beep boop through all the menus and whatnot, and you're on your phone anyway, the Wahoo Element is actually set up all from your phone. So you can set up every single window, every single factor you want to measure. Pretty much anything you want is done on your phone. The accuracy is amazing, and once you use it with a heart strap or even a power meter, you'll know exactly the energy you're expending on the trails. And man, it gives you even more Strava credits, which is sick. Let's talk about forks. NS Dynamics bringing Foresprung into the country. Foresprung offer a bunch of cool custom upgrades to make your forks feel even better. I was actually talking about the Foresprung Luftkapper today with a mate of mine. Absolutely transformed his Zeb. The extra negative chamber space added with better seals, better machining, better everything, just feels absolutely amazing and completely transforms the Zeb into a different fork. Disclaimer, not sure about the new Zeb and how it will work with those. Anyway, the older Zebs absolutely transforms it. Tailored trails, man, every time you go riding, it's so much better to go riding with the locals because they know all the sick trails. They know exactly what you want to ride. Tailored trails tailor your trip to Tasmania. They can take you anywhere from the west to the east coast. They take every single bit of fuss out and make sure that you're having the best experience possible in Tasmania. So if you've got any trips planned, make sure you hit those guys up. Lead Out Sports just got a sick delivery of smooth chain loop. I've actually been using this for a little while and man, it lasts forever. It even in the wet, it's super durable. One application lasts a whole ride, even a couple if you're a bit lazy like me sometimes. And I mean, you just chuck it on the night before, it cleans itself, it gets stuck onto your chain, wipe off the excess in the morning and go ride. It is damn good. Franked, and it's getting colder. Today I'm racing in the wet, 20 mils of rain, would be dead without their pants. Super flexible, super nice looking, casual, tough. I don't have to say much about them. Just go get yourself some and your life will be better. Now, being an Australian podcast, I love to support Australian brands like Dirt Surfers. Dirt Surfers are made in Canberra, designed in Canberra. Everything is done in Canberra. Super good to see Alan absolutely killing it up there. If you want an Aussie-made custom mudguard, there is nowhere else to go. Just go hit up Dirt Surfers. And talking about Aussie made, Crush, these guys absolutely kill it. Big fan of their degreaser. I don't need to go through and degrease everything to the absolute max. The degreaser those guys use is softer and better on everything, but it still cleans away all the shit. just get some. It's sick. You want to wash more stuff off, you use a little bit more. It's not rocket science, but you'd think some rocket science has gone into this stuff because it damn works. Now, I was talking about the cold before. Fist cold weather gloves. Got a fresh pair today. My hands are toasty warm the whole way down. I need them because I use my brakes a lot and I want to feel my brake levers. So I can't say much about Fist. They just work. So head over to any of those sponsors. Support them by using Beyond the Tape, either 10 or 15 at the checkout, or perhaps Beyond the Tape just by itself. It's a lucky dip. Have a go. Get a discount. Let them know you want to support the podcast, and we're helping them out. And yeah. Anyway, this is drolling on a long time. So as per usual, grab a beer, grab water, grab a wine, grab whatever makes you happy, and enjoy this episode. Take 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Just start again because it just kept jumping in and out on that last answer.
Yeah. I answered it and I was like, oh, he's frozen. I was like, oh, bloody hell. Sorry, mate.
It's all good. Well, yeah, Jared Rando, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no worries, man. Thanks very much for having me. I was pretty stoked that you reached out. So, yeah, really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good. Your answers almost sound rehearsed, like we've done this before.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Third time's always a charm.
It's only 2022. We can't have stable internet connections yet. As I mentioned before, previously, you've been in the industry for quite a while and riding bikes for a very long time. Kind of surprised me the other day when you mentioned it, when we chatted. When did you kind of start racing and get into the sport?
Yeah, so I kind of started racing. It was probably 95 or 96, I think. And yeah, kind of got into racing. I used to love snowboarding, and a friend of mine owned a little kind of snowboard shop in Canberra. Paul Gardner actually is still heavily involved with the industry up in Jindabyne, building trails up there. And yeah, we used to they used to organise a Sunday morning shop ride. So I used to ride with those guys, and yeah, and he said to me one day, he goes, "Man, you're actually like pretty good. You should try racing." I was like, "Oh, okay, no worries." So I had a look around and signed up for a local club race, and yeah, I think I got it was at Majura Pines, and I think I got first or second, and yeah, just kind of all kicked off from there. And then from there, kind of started. Just so happened there was a national round up at Majura, not long after that. And so I thought I'd try my hand on the national circuit, and raced in under 17s at the time. And yeah, I knew the track pretty well up there because I used to ride there every day. And yeah, I won the race there. And this big bloke, Nathan Rennie, got second behind me. And yeah, and that kind of kicked off the national racing circuit. And there was a good group of us juniors that were racing. Myself, Rennie, Rick Boyer, Robbie McNaughton, David Nabonnet, some really good guys. And from there I was just hooked, just kind of did the rest of the national series, and from there managed to get selected for the national team in 97 to race world champs. And once kind of went over and raced the international scene and raced world champs in Switzerland, I was just hooked, and couldn't get enough of it. And at that point, I kind of figured out, hey, you could actually be a pro rider and ride bikes every day and get paid for it. And I was like, man, that's what I want to do. So it just kind of progressed from there. So yeah, and then kind of, went on to a pro career, and I guess retired from pro racing in 2010, and did some coaching with the national team after that, which was an awesome experience as well. And so that was kind of it. Probably haven't been really heavily involved in the last kind of 5 years in the scene, but for that period of time, it was just an amazing time, and I absolutely loved it.
Were you straight into the downhill scene then? Was like a big scene in Australia at that point back in 97?
Yeah, it was a pretty big scene. Hey, I kind of when I raced that first national round, I didn't really know what to expect. I really didn't know much about the sport, and got to the race. Like I rode there, just lived on the other side of the hill and rode over there, and had a backpack on and got there, and I was like, oh man, this is actually like a pretty big deal, in those days, national champs were in Canberra in '97 and '98, from memory, up at Maydena. It was just an awesome track, and there were just, I can't remember how many riders, but you're probably talking 500-600 riders, and there were just so many people watching. And I remember at the end of the race, just people pouring out of the forest coming down to the race village, and it just seemed like there were just thousands of people there. It was a really awesome scene back then on the national series.
Yeah, that sounds massive. Like 400 or 500 people racing alone sounds almost like double what we got these days. That's huge.
Yeah, no, it was really a really cool scene. Like I remember they had that was in the days when they had dual slalom as well, and they actually raced dual slalom at the national champs down at next to the lake at Regatta Point there, and there's a dual slalom track on the grass right next to the lake there, and there's like news crews and all this stuff happening. It was really cool. It was just it seemed like it was in the spotlight during that time. Obviously mountain biking had a big kind of boom time during the mid 90s. So it's probably tapering off at that time, but to kind of see the tail end of that mid 90s boom was just awesome. It was it was a very, very different scene to what you see now. It's it's only downhill and cross country, nothing else, and a lot of guys racing hardtails and downhill and short travel bikes, and V brakes and cantilever brakes everywhere. And just some of the amateur classes, like the sport classes back then, were huge. So it wasn't all about. It was a really high kind of participation rate for the sport. And that was just the downhill side. They had cross country happening at the same time as well, with just as many people. So when you added all that together, it was just this massive scene. And anyone who knows Canberra, back then the national champs actually had shuttles to the top of Mount Maydena, and you raced down the top from the top, which was just unheard of these days. It was just really cool time.
How long was the run from the top of there at that point? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think it was around 4 minutes.
Okay.
So, I mean, a lot of people are probably familiar with Maydena Pines, which is the pine forest section at the bottom, but you actually raced from the very top where there's the radar up there, and they kind of cut a track through that went off and on the fire road. And it just seemed like it was one of those races that, we're only riding kind of bikes with 4 inches of travel, like 100 mil travel bikes. So because of that obviously makes the track a lot longer. The tracks are pretty tight and windy as well, but it seemed like a really long track. Like it seemed like this epic journey from the top of the hill to the bottom. It was just awesome, and you had all the other, the big guys there at the time, Ronning, Sharples, Sean McCarroll, all those guys. So, as a young guy, I was just starstruck, racing and then watching those guys. It was just awesome.
Yeah, we'll touch on that in a bit, but you mentioned the bike there. I'm kind of interested to know what you were riding at the time. What was your first, I guess, air quotes, downhill bike at that time?
Yeah, so it was a GT LTS actually. So it was awesome. It was I was stoked on that bike. I wish I still had it, but I think I had Mazzocchi Bomber forks on it, like XTR V brakes. Like it was shit hot back in the day. It was awesome.
They were such a unique design, even by today's standards. It just blows my mind that you guys were racing downhill on them.
Yeah, it was really funny then, because none of the bikes were real downhill bikes per se, or there were real downhill bikes, but there weren't many of them. So most of the time you'd adapt something else. But it was a really funny bike. If you put the seat down too low, because it had the shock right up by the seat there, the shock had bottomed out on the seat, and then shocks were blowing it all the time, and it had these little plastic sleeves where you could, adjust it from 3 to 4 inches of travel, and they'd crack all the time. And yeah, you know, I can't remember how many frames I actually broke or cracked back then, but they'd keep, you know, you'd crack a mainframe, they'd upgrade it, and then you'd upgrade it again. And I think through the course of the warranty claims, ended up with an STS DH by the end of it, which was also awesome. So yeah, kind of had this series of GT bikes, which is pretty rad.
That's amazing. I never even contemplated that linkage would bottom out in the seat. And as soon as you mentioned it, you can like look at a photo and say it would just hit the bottom of that seat. That's crazy.
Yeah. It did. And the other funny thing about those bikes is, and I never realised it till I got on another bike, they used to have really bad brake jacks. When you hit brakes, they'd kind of stink bug up, like the rear end would rise. And then, my next bike after, and I didn't know any different. Then my next bike after that was a mountain cycle. And I was like, oh man, this thing just feels, had 6 inches of travel and upside down triple clamp forks. And I was like, whoa, this is just like next level, like just blown away by the thing. So it was really cool. That's the cool thing about that time. The bikes were progressing so quickly, which was just really cool, but because they were progressing so fast, they kind of didn't necessarily keep up with the demands of downhill racing. So, equipment was definitely, it'd have its shortcomings, to say the least.
That was like, everything was just going leaps and bounds as fast as it possibly could. But there's also kind of that time of lighter was better, correct? Like they wanted to make it as light as possible. And sometimes durability was not at the forefront of the designers' minds in some ways.
Yeah, for sure. You'd kind of pick that up in some of the designs, and then once it kind of got to when it kind of started going to more of that 8 inches of travel and, kind of starting in the, 98, 99, that's when the equipment definitely started getting a lot better. Like when you saw boxes coming onto the scene and, more specific downhill stuff that was more readily available. I think the problem in kind of the mid 90s to kind of, or at least when I started, was that downhill stuff. It just wasn't really readily available and it was so expensive what was there. So everyone kind of adapted. But it was pretty cool. You look back on it and you see all these classic bikes and they're just awesome things, so many different variations of suspension and things like that. So it was really cool.
It's all been tried before and it's whittled down to the kind of 4 or 5 main ones we have today. It's so cool to see.
No, it was just awesome, just being able to see that progression with the gear. And because the bikes were progressing so fast, you'd go, just adapting to those different bikes every year was really cool too. And, with the slow, geometry probably changed a bit slower than suspension travel back then too. So it was, and then tyres as well, tyres trying to keep up as well. So there'd always be, some point of failure on the bike that would kind of get upgraded a bit later. And, back then it took a while for stuff to, come through from a kind of prototype type thing you'd seen in the magazines. And then, 2 years later it would be out. So there was this kind of lag between seeing the pros with all the awesome new stuff that just seemed light years ahead of what everyone else was racing. And then you'd finally get on it and be like, man, this is awesome. It was just, it was really cool.
It's a good time to be a part of the sport. So you mentioned before, we'll go back onto the racing a bit, but you started in like 95, 96 and raced that race and did pretty well. And then you're at world champs in 97. What was it? Were you just getting all your information about what Europe was like and what European riding was from those magazines? And were you pretty damn nervous to head over there and try your luck?
Yeah. Like, it's kind of one of those things where I just had absolutely no idea, to be honest. Like you'd read, back then you'd see there would be some videos coming out and stuff like that if you could get a hold of them. And, you'd read the magazines, but you just had absolutely no concept of how big the runs were over there and how steep they were and, just how open they were as well. We're so used to kind of these tight trails in Australia, whereas once you got to Europe, it's more like downhill ski racing where they just, mark it out down a hill, and everything's so wide and so straight, and there's so many line choices, and it's changing all the time. 1 minute it's sunny and the next minute it's raining. So, it was just like full on race culture shock when you got there, and just, totally overwhelming. As a 16-year-old I think I was riding I rode a Santa Cruz Heckler at the first World Champs there. That was after the GT, but it was just like this crazy, like the change was just, unbelievable. It was, just, nothing could, prepare you for it seemed like. And I remember even when I was coaching some of the juniors back kind of, 2011, 2012, just taking those guys up on the gondola at Mont Saint Anne and going, all right, boys, here's what a real track looks like. And they look down and they're just going, whoa, you kind of to see that again in their faces when, you see this section of track where in Australia you might have, half a dozen turns and it's just a straight run and everyone's doing 70 Ks an hour. It's just awesome, that shock of when you get there and you see what a World Cup or World Champs track really is like. It's just, it's really unbelievable.
I still haven't managed to be at any of those races, so I'm definitely keen to kind of have that experience. But what was the process like for you to get there and be a part of the team, and were there coaches at that time as well for you guys?
No, there weren't really any coaches. It was kind of, they did do, effectively it was just the World Championships trip, which I think back then it was Cycling Australia, or I think they used to call it Australian Cycling Federation back then. So they'd, obviously select the World Championships team and they'd take the team over to compete at World Championships. There's probably a little bit more on the cross-country side with regards to coaches, but, downhill then was a relatively young sport, so, obviously you had some of the pro guys that were there and they'd always be happy to talk and help out, like Ronnie Sharples, but there wasn't a huge pool of riders. So it was, it was a little bit of flying blind at the start there. And it kind of, every year you learn a lot more and you go back and you go, I'm going to be way more prepared for next year, and you kind of progress there. Plus, you're racing with all the other guys and we're all chatting about it and, what we need to do and how we can do it better. And so it's probably just that exposure to it was the biggest factor.
And you mentioned a few times like the other riders that you were heading over there with, and I'm looking at the results from that first one in Chateau d'Eau. And you've got riders that are over there, like the elite riders. You've got Nico Vuillio, John Tomac, Gracia, Pete, Rockwell, Palmer, and then obviously you got Sharples and Ronings and all those guys as well. Just how starstruck were you when you went over there, and how overwhelming was it to see all those guys pinning it down the hill?
Oh yeah, starstruck doesn't even sum it up. It was just crazy to see those guys and how fast they were as well. They've got all the best gear and they're all decked out, look like rock stars. It was just sensational. I can remember it in my mind now, watching Nico come down into the switchbacks. I think he won by about 6 seconds or something. And you'd kind of look up and see these switchbacks for the last little bit of the track, and we're all down there watching, and everyone's coming down and doing pretty well. And he came down, and he was just so fast through there, And it's so we were just blown away, and he just smoked everyone. We're like, oh my god, this is amazing! Just couldn't believe it.
Insane. Yeah, you're not far off 6.19 seconds, so your memory's still good. That's bang on.
Yeah, I'll never forget that.
That's
one.
Huge.
Yeah, no, it's a standout in my mind for sure. Just seeing that run, and everyone looked so fast, and he was just had such this incredible riding style. For me, he was one of the riders I really looked up to with his riding style and his approach to racing. And when we saw him come down, he just looked so much faster and smoother, and more in control than everyone. And then you looked at the time and you're just like, oh my God, like, how did he do that? You know, we're just, you know, he's probably like a minute faster than we were. Like, it was just unbelievable.
Well, he pioneered the fast in, slow out turning style, right? Slow in, fast out turning style. Whereas before it was just like hit the turn as hard as you possibly can, whereas he was doing all the braking early and getting through it. What was it about his style that you kind of liked and emulated and wanted to take from?
Like, I think with Nico, like, his style, it was just so smooth and consistent. And if you ever watch him ride, you can kind of see he's on the edge, but he really knew where to push and where not to push on a downhill track. And he just never seemed to make a mistake. You know, he was just so consistent. And, you know, back then he was compared to the other guys, he was definitely a much smaller guy than the other guys. So he relied so much on his technique and that approach, and his bikes were just always so, you know, they just always looked so dialed. And you know, he was, you know, you'd never see him unclipping a turn, or very rarely, and just, you know, so focused. It was just awesome. I just really liked watching him ride and how he approached it. And he just looked like he never lost any time anywhere. You know, even in sections where he wasn't, you know, the strongest, he really worked to make those sections work for him. Like, it was, you know, fast and wide open, and, you know, the bigger guys would carry more speed. You could see him just on this pinpoint line, you know, tucking everywhere he could, and you know, knew where to pedal and where to tuck and how to make that time and just absolutely maximise it. You know, for him, it was just awesome to watch.
True champion of the sport. And yeah, I don't think there'll ever be another person to ride like him or be as good and as calculated as he was. Yeah, no, it'd be hard to see, you know. Obviously, you know, I think back then he was, the way he approached it and, you know, the level of professionalism he took with the sport was kind of so much higher than everyone else. But that's you know, could also be said about the French back then and now. You know, they've always been so dominant in the sport. You know, and they have such a massive team of staff and people on the course and timing sections and, you know, watching other riders and helping pick lines. And, you know, he really seemed to use that to his advantage. It was, there's a pretty amazing approach to the sport, which I think, you know, a lot of guys could still learn a lot today from about racing. It was, you know, I think it's obviously a lot more professional now, but he's really the one who was that first approach. It was just amazing. Was that pretty daunting for you to witness? Like, you're heading over there with Rennie and a few of the other guys, and we weren't exactly known for our preparedness and training and everything at the time. It would have been two completely different mindsets. Was that daunting for you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's, you know, it was kind of one of those things you'd look at and it almost seemed unachievable, you know, because they were that good back then, you know, and you'd even hear the other pro riders talking about it. I was like, man, he's just so good and he just doesn't mess up and he's got all this support and the bikes are just so good and, you know, he's got all the best gear and, you know, he's got the system in his tyres and, you know, all this technology that just, you know, wasn't available to anyone else. But, you know, he just had it and made it happen. It was just awesome.
How did that, like, so once you did that one kind of world champs overseas, what was it like coming back to Australia? And it looks like you put the training in and put some effort in, because within a couple of years you were up on the podium at a world champs. Like, what was it about that first race was there much in that first race that kind of changed your mindset to everything?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you definitely, you know, from that first race, I think we all kind of came back. Like, I think Rennie actually did quite well at that first race, but he's just an animal. He's at a different level. But, you know, to kind of come back and you see all those guys and then you kind of start adapting that to your riding and you realise that, you know, you've got to learn to go fast. You've got to learn to ride the fast sections fast. You know that the tracks are going to be, you know, instead of going 20, 30 Ks an hour the whole time, you're going to be going 40, 50. So, you know, we'd start looking for, you know, faster tracks to ride and train on. And, focus on those faster sections and, take more note of picking lines and, training and being fit and riding more and, just really pushing at the races as well. We'd all push each other to kind of reach that level because we knew, what was going to come up at the next World Champs. So that really helped. The next World Champs after that one was in Mont Saint Anne, which is one of the most amazing tracks on the circuit as far as, how wide open and crazy it is. And you hear about it, and then once again you get there and you're like, oh my God, it's happened again. We're freaking out. But at least you're a bit more prepared and what to think, and you take a calmer approach and you're a bit more, you've learned that little bit more. And and so back then you could race juniors for 3 years, so you could race when you were 16, 17 and 18 basically. So we were kind of lucky to be able to have that first year as a learning curve. I think that really helped us a lot because if you're doing it for 2 years as a junior, you get that first race and it's just overwhelming. It's really hard to do well. Then you've got one more shot after that. But we were lucky to have those kind of 3 years, which was pretty beneficial, I think. And we just kind of kept on progressing when we were back in Australia and knew more and more, and bikes were getting better, and that's kind of how it went down. So it all kind of progressed from there.
And were you doing this all as a privateer at the time? Did you have any sponsorship or any support for your racing ventures?
Oh, no, definitely had some. I mean, obviously support through biggest sponsor was always mum and dad. I think you never appreciate how good a sponsor mum and dad is until you look back. So thanks, mum. Thanks, dad. But no, definitely had some local support. I rode for I think the second 2 years as I was a junior. I was actually had some support through Mountain Cycle in Australia. That was a really awesome bike. So I think I think that was the Shockwave back then, which was a pretty rad machine.
The best names back then as well.
Oh yeah, that was such awesome bikes, man. That was works of art. So much metal and 1,000 worlds, and just unreal. So yeah, and then local shops helping out as well, and local guys and local fast guys who were mentors. Like there's a bloke here, Glenn Adams, who used to ride me every day, and he was awesome. He really helped me progress. So yeah, I think it's having support as far as bikes and equipment is one thing, but having that other support through your family, friends, and there's people in racing. I think that's probably the most important part of it.
Yeah, 100%. Like that support network as a whole can make a huge difference, both like financially and mentally, right? Yeah, without those guys around you. Yeah, absolutely. And especially, as we kind of were racing a bit more, the seasoned pro guys are starting to take note, and, you feel more comfortable talking to other guys, because at first you're like, oh my God, I can't even talk to you. Like, you're just a guy. And then, you'd end up becoming friends, and everyone's just there to help each other. So that's, that really helps. You realise everyone's just a human at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's it. Eh?
And it seems like, as it comes into the 2000s and whatnot, you started to really up the ante and take on the World Cups and stuff. Was that, I guess, what was that like during that time? Because it was the era where it started to really kind of dial back with its popularity, I guess.
Yeah, so probably, I think it was 1999, actually, we decided to do a it was me, Rennie was already over there racing with the team, the Pro Junior X team, and so myself, I think Rick Boyer kind of spoke a bit about it when he was on with you, but myself, Rick, and Robbie McNaughton were like, hey, let's go race some World Cups, so we just kind of hatched together this plan, and I won't repeat too much because Rick gave it a pretty good summary, but yeah, we were just a bunch of boneheads decided to buy a van and travel around the US, had absolutely no idea what we were doing, and somehow made it to every race. yeah, so we're pretty lucky. My who is now my wife, she picked us up at the airport at the time with a couple of others and kind of looked after us a bit. So thank you for that, honey. And that, once we got on the road by ourselves, we were just, yeah, it was just chaos. I don't know how we came out alive at the other end, but it was it was really awesome. So we made it to some World Cups and some NORBA races, which was pretty cool. And then when the guys left at the end of the trip, they actually hung out a bit and did a couple more races with the Pro Junior X team. So got to get a bit more exposure there. And it was Mark Rogers who ran the team. He's still chat to him to this day every now and then. He invited me to ride for the team the next year, and I was and that would have been the year 2000. So it was myself and Johnny Waddell. That was our first year as kind of pro racers, racing the what was the NORBA series back then. And it was just an awesome time then as well. So and that's when we really, really progressed. We had awesome bikes. We were riding the year 2000 Intense M1s, which were just, phenomenal bikes even for them. They were just, so we had really good equipment. We were up at Big Bear. We could ride the chairlift every day. We'd go dirt jumping in the morning, downhilling in the afternoon. Then we had these crappy old road bikes we'd do laps around the lake with every now and then. We'd call them the road rockets. And we literally just rode every day, like for, 6 months straight, just non-stop. And and that really helped us progress.
Just brutal, raw bike time can often be the best for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And we, for us, it wasn't so much about, training to be the best downhill racing. Like we just wanted to ride, like that's probably one thing that stands out through those years is I wasn't really too worried about racing per se. I just wanted to ride my bike, and racing is what would be able to give me that, opportunity to ride my bike all the time. So, we weren't just downhilling. We'd go dirt jumping and street riding and go to the BMX track and just anything, it was just, and then on the weekend, we're like, oh, we're going to a race. Okay, we'll go to a race and, do a ride and come back. Like, let's go riding again. You couldn't stop us. Hey, we just, it's all we wanted to do was ride.
Was that pretty common throughout the Australian riders at the time? Because it seems like a very big story. Obviously, you and John Waddell were doing it. I know Kavarik, and I've heard Kavarik and Rennie have mentioned it before as well. Like, it just seems like everyone went over there and just had a good time and came away with good results.
Yeah, for sure. I think that was probably one thing that was with that, that era of riders is just all the guys, just everyone just wanted to ride, if I'd catch up with Rennie to ride in between races, like we'd just go street riding or we'd just go to skate parks or, and then we'd go, just go ride around the city and just go, oh, that looks cool. Let's go, let's see if we can, bunny hop manual this ledge or whatever, it was, I think there was just this kind of, this mentality of everyone would just spend so much time on the bikes, and that translated into other skills as well. And I remember even Kavarik back in the day, you'd be like, you'd see him, he was such a, he still is but he was just so amazing at just street riding and dirt jumping and stuff. And you'd see him after a practice session at Threadbow, and I remember him, there were these 2 piles of gravel, and Kavarik's just kind of shaped him into this jump, and he's just, sessioning these 2 piles of gravel, and everyone's just sitting back and watching, and that's after a practice session, whereas, you've been riding. So, and we'd do the same, we'd be at a, I remember once we had dual slalom practice in the morning. We had downhill practice and dual slalom practice, and we were riding our slalom bikes back to where we're staying. I think it was in Deer Valley at a national there, me and Waddell. And then we get up to the condo, and I'm like, hey man, do you reckon we can hop manual that ledge? He's like, I don't know, let's try, And we sat there for an hour and a half trying to bunny hop manual this ledge, and we just couldn't get it. So we ended up with this little booster rock, and we're doing it, and got it then. And, I stacked it into the creek on the side, and we just kept on trying. And, we go home and we wake up the next day, like, oh man, we're stuffed. We're like, oh, let's keep riding.
Just ride it off. You'll be fine.
Yeah. So it was just, yeah, that's it was definitely something back then, and a lot of the other guys did too. You got to remember back then there wasn't really a free ride scene as such. So you'd have guys like I remember Aaron Chase, like he was racing dual slalom and downhill, but you just see him everywhere between races. Him and like Kyle Ebbett and some of those East Coast guys, and you just see him riding everywhere and just jibbing around. It was just and then everyone would join in. It was just really cool.
Yeah, well, like I don't know, but I guess there wasn't as much structured training as what there is now. Like athletes having proper rest days and training regimes and everything like that wouldn't have been as big of a deal back then.
No, probably not so much, and it definitely came in a bit later once you kind of learned a bit more. Once we all learned a bit more about it, I guess. But it was just that pure enjoyment of riding. Like racing was one thing. We all love to race, but more than racing, I think we all just love to ride. And we're just on our bikes all the time. It was just obviously if you want to be the best racer you can be, you've got to kind of pick and choose what you do and recover and all the rest. But as far as back then, we just weren't so much focused on that. We were just all we wanted to do was ride. But next couple of years after that, once learned a bit more about training and what to do and how to structure it, and kind of grew out of street riding and crashing in skate parks. Definitely took things a bit more serious. But yeah, no, I do really miss those days. Like it was really fun.
And what was the NORBA series like at that time? Like that would have been prime NORBA times, or was that when it was starting to kind of disappear?
I don't know what it was like before because I didn't see it obviously, but everyone, you'd hear that we got there and it just seemed massive. Everyone talked about how it was dying, but for us it was just like huge, just teams everywhere and pits set up and, massive pit setups that you just couldn't believe. And it wasn't just pits, it was just like exhibitors, and it was like every race was kind of like a trade show almost, with racing thrown in. And, I remember the prize money used to get, I think you'd get $100 for 20th place,
Yeah, sick.
and in dual slalom, you'd make it through one round and you get like $180, and this is in, 2000 type thing. So, if you'd make, I remember if you got a top 10 in the downhill and got through a couple of rounds in the slalom, you'd walk away with $600-700 prize money pretty consistently. And it paid really deep as well. And, Chevy Trucks was a sponsor of the series, and, Gatorade had a massive presence. And I think it was even on ESPN or, it was on kind of TV over there as well, on like cable TV, so it was, it was huge, but you definitely saw that decline kind of start to kick in, probably from kind of 2001, it definitely started tapering off, which was really sad to see.
It was it was bigger than the World Cups in at some points, and you just had some of the best talent. Like you obviously had Kyle Strait and, Ropolato, Zink, and all those guys were coming up at the time as well, racing those races, and it would have been cool to witness.
Yeah, no, it was really cool. Like I remember actually meeting Kyle Strait for the first time. I was with Johnny Waddell at when we were riding around Big Bear that year in 2000. This little kid shows up with his old man, because he used to be he was really tiny as a kid, and we had this step up opposite the servo there that we'd just ride all day, because we'd ride and then you could get 39-cent hamburgers and a double gulp full of Gatorade and then keep you going all day. But he showed up and he was just doing all these tricks and stuff like that. I'm like, wow, this kid's pretty good. And yeah, sure enough, he did all right out of it. But yeah, no, it was a really cool scene. Just seeing those up and coming riders, and some of the American riders, they were so talented all around, like guys like Kyle and Cam Zink and Cam McCall. Those guys who could do the free ride and race as well. Kurt Voorhees, he was another one. Kurt Voorhees is probably one of you ask me, he's one of the best bike riders of all time. So, you know, seeing those guys and their skill sets, how fast they could go and what else they could do, that was really, really cool and inspiring for me as well.
Kurt Voyer is one of the most underrated riders ever, by far.
He is, absolutely. Like, you know, the guy's podiumed on World Cups and, you know, he's got insane dirt jumping skills and, you know, I don't think he ever got the credit he deserved. Like, I remember one of the practice sessions at Crankworks, like there's these guys it was like a step up onto like a seesaw or a teeter-totter. It was a pretty big, like I probably wouldn't have even ridden the thing, you know, and everyone's kind of trying it out. And Boris comes up and he tries to bar spin up onto it, like catches his bars wrong, like falls over the bars. As he's going over the bars, the thing tips and he just kind of grabs onto the end of it and then just looks up and just starts laughing. I was going, oh my God, that was gnarly. How didn't you die?
He's got that kind of zero fucks about his life attitude. And yeah, I'll shout out another podcast, but if you haven't listened to his potty on Vital, definitely go do that because it's pretty gnarly.
Yeah. And the dude's an awesome skateboarder as well. Like he's just a man.
Yeah. Frustrating. Took all our talent. Did you end up going to that kind of factory team race pro type deal at some point throughout those 2000s period?
Yeah, for sure. So 2000 had that year on Big Bear, up in Big Bear with the Pro Junior X team. And I think I finished 7th overall in the downhill series that year, and then got a ride with the Fosa Zonic team the following year, which was just a really phenomenal program. And those bikes were just like, I was pretty lucky actually. I got to ride some really cool bikes back in the day.
I was thinking that.
Come to think of it. Yeah, so I rode for Foes for 2 years after that, and had 2 pretty good years with Foes. So I finished 7th again, and then the year after that I finished 4th, and then rode for Giant got a ride on the Giant US factory team in 2003, and pretty much rode for Giant until I retired from it all in kind of 2013, 2014. So I had a really long stint with Giant, which was unbelievable. But it was kind of a different team. I always got these really fond memories of the Foes team because, it's just this little, I couldn't believe we went to see where the bikes were made, and it was this little shop, it's about half the size of a basketball court back then. I'm not sure what it's like now, and they're making everything in-house there, making suspension and the bikes and, rear shocks and forks, and that was just really cool, all made in, just outside of LA. That was really cool, and the bikes are just these, incredible creations that just rode, so well and were just so far ahead of their time. So that was really cool. And then, Giant for, 10 years plus after that was awesome too, such a good group of guys there, and, predominantly based in the US, but getting over the World Cups as well. A lot of the guys that were around when I started there are still involved with the company and the team to this day. So, that really shows what a good program it is when you've got people staying that long. So, I was really lucky, to be honest, I think, with the opportunities I had and the teams I got to ride for. It was really good.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the foes, like the DHS mono and stuff, with those semi-high pivot, high forward pivots and semi kind of VPP style suspension. It's just a whole different, like, they were so far ahead of their time. And were you riding Dorados and stuff at that time as well, or were you on boxes?
So on the Foes, we actually rode the Foes suspension, which was made in-house there, which was just crazy. The first year we had, we had box shocks on the rear and then the Foes fork on the front. And then the next year they had a Canut shock on the rear, which they call it, position sensitive valving or something like that. It ended up being the Manitou SPV valving when they Charlie Canutt licensed it. But that, those bikes then, that 2002 bike with that rear shock, it was just unlike anything, I'd ever ridden or will likely ever ride again. There was 9 inches of travel, and they had really light springs. I think we were running like 250, 270 pound springs. And you could, you could ride the bike in the parking lot and just lean back and bottom it out. And then when you rode it on the trail, it just held up. Like you said, they had these really long swing arms and the big forward pivot that just made the bike so stable. They actually had really long chainstays for back in the day. And I hadn't ridden the bike yet. We were going up to Big Bear to test the new suspension, and I saw Eric Carter who'd tested it. And he was like, "Oh man, you just wait till you get on that thing. You are so lucky." Like, I test rode one, and he was just blown away by it. And I got on it, I was like, "Holy crap!" It was just like you couldn't break traction with the rear wheel, and it was just it was a phenomenal bike. Had its downfalls. You couldn't bunny hop it, or it didn't jump real well. Yeah. But as a pure downhill race machine, it was just unbelievable.
And so what was it like going from, being that, I guess you've had some support along the way, but going from the privateer to these kind of factory teams like Foes, where you do have, suspension in-house and you're kind of getting looked after a little bit? Like, what was the level of support like from those guys? And was it quite daunting for you at the time?
It did make a huge difference. Probably the biggest difference was, having a mechanic, I think. We had a really good mechanic on those Dog Boys still getting around in New Zealand, I think. But just that, and not having to worry about things like travel or your dodgy green van breaking down and stuff like that. So, that's probably and then just everything too, having people to talk to, and, not having to worry about tyres and being able to put fresh tyres on whenever you want. And, not having to worry about equipment at all. If you break something, you just get a new one. And, I destroyed a rear wheel, here's another one, I'll rebuild the other, but just allowed. And it's one of those things, like I mentioned before, like you kind of don't really appreciate the support of that network around the team and the people until you kind of look back on it. So it was, it really does make a huge difference not having to worry about that stuff, for sure. Plus the expense, and you're getting a salary, and you don't have to, you can spend more time training and all the rest. So, when you add that all together, it's night and day.
We can see like your results start jumping up and up and up until you're a pretty much consistent World Cup top 20 rider. Like, it's almost instantaneous with that time that you signed on with them. Your results just go through the roof and up towards that. Do you reckon that was the bigger part of the reason? Is you're on that bike, you got that support, everything's around you to do better, and all you've got to do is do your job, essentially?
Yeah, absolutely. By that point, it's just all about going fast and doing everything you can to faster and get stronger and get fitter. I think one of the biggest differences for me too was when I think it's still around there's a thing in Canberra called the ACT Academy of Sport, and they had a cycling program. So it's kind of like a government-funded institute to help develop athletes, kind of like the AIS, but I guess the state version. Actually, got picked up as part of that program because they had a focus on kind of World Championships medals at the time for cycling. And then through that, I was able to get in touch with, a really good strength and conditioning coach and, access to a gym.
Okay.
And that was when I really started training in the gym seriously. And that was kind of in between 2001 and 2002. And that made a really big difference as well. Just understanding that, the gym work is, about, stability of your body and injury prevention, and also just, that obviously developing your strength and your power and your speed that was a really big, that made a really big difference for me as well. I just got really lucky in that I had the access to that, and the strength and conditioning coach who was there, John Mitchell, I actually saw the other day. He's working in the with NRL and rugby teams these days. He was just phenomenal, and the stuff he was doing was really far ahead, I think, of his time, and that really helped too.
What were you kind of doing for the strength and conditioning at that point?
So it was a really heavy focus on kind of power development. So not so much strength, but a lot of stability and kind of power development. And I remember at the time actually talking to John when we started, and he knew nothing about downhill. So he kind of sat down and really took some time to try to understand the sport, and he came out and watched a race. And so his kind of take from it was basically, never did anything with, or very rarely did anything with two legs, for example. Like squats were always single leg squats, and aiming to make them as unstable as possible. There's a lot of power work, box jumps, things like that, which I think is all pretty standard these days. But back then, everyone was, and not real heavy weights either, just light weights, and kind of developing that power element and stability. Which that was really good.
Yeah. I mean, that reflects in what I kind of did last year when I decided to pretend to race nationals, and I did some training with Sean Ahern, and like I've always been into that strength and lifting heavy and doing those bigger weights. But then once you actually become unstable and do all that power work, your riding just goes through the roof. It's next level. So for him to be doing that 20 years ago, that's insane.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and that's what people don't realize. If you're doing that training, you probably realize, like, man, I don't have to lift a lot of weight. Stability is way more important. So and when you think about it, when you're cornering, to be able to hold the bike steady and still when you're cornering, like any kind of sideways movement's going to put you offline and help you tighten. The steadier you can stay on the bike, the better. So it's to hear that from you just reinforces that. Like it's awesome. How much of a difference did that make to your riding?
Like, you just summed it up perfectly with that cornering. Like, you just hold everything better and everything stronger, and your ability to adjust and move is so much better from it. Instead of just being able to get your bike out of trouble, you don't get into trouble. It's this weird thing, but it works so damn well.
No, that's a great analogy. And then it translates into pedaling power, and it's like I always used to say to guys when I was coaching, I'd say, how much pedaling do you reckon there is in the downhill track? They go, 30 seconds. I go, well, if you can improve that by 10%, how much is that? 3 seconds. So is it that worth training for? Like, and that, you understand if you can improve your pedaling by 10%, that's time you're always going to make, because it's, you don't crash when you're pedaling. Plus you're stronger at the bottom, and that's where you make up all your time.
Yeah.
So
100%. I've never thought of that. Like, even though it's 1/5, it could make a huge amount of time at the end, because 3 seconds these days is 15th to first, really.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's not just that. Your fitness is, you think about when you're at the bottom of a downhill track and how you can barely hang on and barely focus. If you're fit and strong, you're going to be better at the bottom of the track. And in my mind, that's where races are won or lost. That's where everyone can go fast for the first 30 seconds of the track, but it's after that first minute where it starts to separate people, and that's where the fitter you are and the stronger you are, the better you're going to be. And it's not only that, it's your endurance, because a downhill race isn't just a 3-minute race. It's it's a 3-minute race after 2 or 3 days of practice where you're absolutely flogging yourself, and the fitter you are, the more downhill run, the more practice runs you can do, and the more you're going to know the track and the more you're going to be able to adapt. And by the time you get to your race run at the tail end of that, if you've got that endurance and strength, you're going to have such a big advantage over anyone who doesn't, even if you're the most talented bike handler in the world, that's, if you're tired, it's not going to help you that much these days.
All goes to shit, really, to put it bluntly.
Yeah.
So at what you did well, like we mentioned all this training and you've bumped up the results and stuff. What was it like to going to Giant, like that huge team at the time? Like they were pretty important for the downhill series and stuff around 2007 through to, you were there for 7 or 8 years, right? Like,
yeah. So I started with Giant in 2003. And I started off with a deal. I signed a deal with the factory US team. And then, obviously had some really good support from Giant Australia throughout the years as well, which was awesome. But yeah, like that team was just kind of like, it was kind of like another level on top of those because, there's more staff, a lot of the staff are full-time, but it's also, I guess that you get a lot more exposure to the industry and what your job is as a racer. It's at that point, social media is not a thing back then, but we'd still go around and do lots of, events like, there might be a shop opening and we'd go there and you'd have other kind of, it wasn't just all about racing as well. You had other duties to do, and it all came down to helping push the brand and sell bikes and the rest. So, that was a real eye opener and kind of just, I guess, another step up in kind of professionalism and what was expected of you as a racer, I guess. You kind of realize that it's not just all about racing. There's lots more that goes with it. But then, you had access, rather than having to drive 3 days to races, you'd get on a plane and fly there and you'd get there. And so, that next level of support as well was really cool. And that also helped a lot as well.
I think that's a really important point you touch on with like what it is to be a racer and be a part of a brand. Is like people see racing as this amazing job. You get to go to 7 or 8 races a year and you get paid for a whole year of riding. Like that's what it looks like from the outside, I assume, for a lot of people. But when in reality, you're getting flown around to do 1 or 2 day trips or visits, or there's quite a fair bit of work that you've got to do outside of racing, which I think was undervalued from a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, you definitely, it's definitely more than just racing. And don't get me wrong, it's a lot better than the real world. It's not. At the time it seemed like there was certainly more stuff, but now having a real job, I'm like, oh man, that was the best thing ever. But yeah, I think that commitment, and I can only imagine what guys have commitments to with social media and content production and everything else these days. I feel like I was pretty lucky to, be in a kind of pre-social media day because, we'd focus more on, things like print magazines and, video shoots and things like that. And, you do go to product launches when they're launching a new bike and ride with magazine editors. And, but, that was an amazing part of it too, because you just meet some amazing people and get to go to amazing places. And, once again, it goes back to that thing where it's just that enjoyment of riding as well, which was just awesome. That's really ultimately what it came down to back then. Was I still loved riding my bike and just loved going on epic rides up into hills, and that's always the part that I'd kind of love the most about it.
Was there a point where you started to realize that you wanted to, I guess, not bow out or stop or anything, but you wanted to wind back the racing and you end up doing a bit more coaching and mentorship roles for the Australian team and for those around you?
So I guess kind of towards the tail end of my career riding for Giant. Obviously you get older and your results don't get so well, and your results aren't as good, and my wife now, who was just supporting me so much back then, you'd go away for 3 weeks, I'm like, oh man, I miss being away from my girlfriend and all the rest. So it kind of definitely started to, all the travel definitely starts to wear on you when especially for me, I was racing, based in the US, racing World Cups in Europe and going back and forth and back and forth. And so, you get older and, it's natural attrition. You kind of get, slower as you get older, I guess. And so for me, it kind of, had a pretty good year in 2008, raced the full World Cup circuit, kind of finished inside the top 20. I was teammates with Emil Cavalier at that time, and he was, we're right around the 20th for a full World Cup circuit, crashing out at a couple of races. And then, 2009 had a pretty poor year racing. So racing full World Cups 2009 didn't have the greatest year. And then next year they signed Danny Hart and Duncan Riffle to the team, and they, I think, I can't remember what I finished overall. It might have been in the 30s or low 40s or something. They kind of said, yeah, we've got these new guys. If you want to stay on, we'll, if you maybe just do some domestic races and race some stuff in North America. I was like, yeah, that's cool. That's kind of, I was happy with that, because the guys have been supporting me so long. So I was kind of like, yeah, just whatever you guys need me to do, and so that was pretty cool. But then, 2010, because I didn't actually race any World Cups before the selection for World Champs. Technically, by the selection criteria, I wasn't actually eligible for selection.
Okay.
When the selection came up, Chris Clark, who was the coach at the time, kind of said to me, hey, you're not eligible for selection. I was like, yeah, I know. I was like, well, what have I, I was kind of thinking, like, what have I got to do? And he said, well, do you feel like coaching and helping out coaching for some of the downhill guys? I was like, yeah, no, that sounds really cool, because I kind of knew in the back of my mind I wasn't going to be racing for much longer, and at least internationally. So I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll give that a go, and that might lead to something else. So, so it was really weird. I was at the race, and the team was all set up there, and I was like, staying with the team, and I was still kind of doing stuff with the Giant team. And I was like, yeah, I'm just going to go coach the Aussie juniors.
Yeah, right.
So it was really odd at first, but then I really enjoyed it. It was something I really enjoyed, and really, just really enjoyed it. And especially at Mont Saint Anne, where for me as a junior, going back all those years, where I had that experience being there for the first time, and I could see that that same energy in these young guys, and to be able to help them, but it was really rewarding. And so from there, we kind of moved. Moved back to Australia, and there was some support there for a junior kind of program in Australia, and I kind of did that for the next 4 years. But I definitely missed the international racing, but being able to transition into that coaching, especially with guys that I knew that they were experienced, but we were going to be able to experience what I experienced when I was a junior, and to be able to be part of that again on the other end, that was just really cool. And I learned probably more through those 4 or 5 years of coaching than I did as 10 years as a pro racer, I reckon.
Yeah, right. That's crazy. What I mean, like, through that time, thinking of who would have been coming up then, like, there would have been some pretty big names that are big names that now that you would have been coaching when they were young bucks. Like, who were some of the guys you were coaching at the time, and what were some of the biggest things they needed to learn?
Oh man, I'll get the list out.
Get the scroll. Yep.
Yeah. Probably the biggest names you'd recognise now: Jack Moyer, Dean Lucas. Who else was through at the time? Davey McMillan, Connor. He came to a couple of camps. Troy Brosnan, he was kind of doing his own thing with proteins, like he was already doing so well. But even just be able to see him, what he was doing when he was a junior was amazing. But actually on the program, we had some just awesome guys, and there was some guys who were just phenomenal riders who also probably didn't make it to that pro stage, but there's so many who had that talent and could have. It just comes down to it's just so competitive, especially then, because the sport's so much bigger and it's so much more competitive, and everyone's got the access to all that knowledge as well. There's some, and seeing some of those guys as juniors. Like I remember once we had this camp here in Canberra, and I had Rennie down helping out for it, and Connor showed up, and he was riding I think he was probably 16 or 17, and he's riding this Kona with a cracked head tube, and and he's just like, the guy's just one of the most incredible bike handlers out there. And we're doing some time sections on the World Champs track, and I don't know if you've seen footage from there, but there's this huge rock garden at the top, and so we're doing sections that are about 10 seconds long, and trying to teach the guys how to break down lines and differences it makes, and we're comparing times at the bottom. We're timing this rock garden, and it's about anywhere from 10 to 12 seconds long for most of the guys who came through there. And Connor kind of walks up and has a look at it and goes back up, and he just comes in going twice as fast as anyone else. We're kind of standing back, and he kind of does 3 gaps through the whole thing, which was just absolutely one of the sickest things I've ever seen anyone do on a bike to this day. And, Rennie looks at me and he goes, "That's why I don't race bikes anymore." I was like, yeah, man, that's like, guys talked about that line doing it at World Champs and the World Cup in Canberra, and no one didn't. Here's this 2 years later, here's this 16-year-old kid doing it on a bike with a cracked head tube and just bombing it, for no other reason than he just wants to push himself. There's no one watching. He's just wants to go as fast as he can. It's just awesome.
Yeah, I guess everyone's probably stoked around him, and he goes, "Oh, yeah, that was all right." Like the most humble dude I've ever met in my life.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Unreal.
What was it like? There's some huge names to be having coaching and being around those guys. Like, what is it like seeing them achieve the levels they're at now, and knowing that you might have been a small part of that?
Yeah. I think, just seeing those guys go through and, achieving what they are it's really cool, even though, like I said, it was just a very small part of that. But, to kind of, I guess when it was part of that program, I know how important it was to me when I was a young guy, and to be able to, see those guys have that attitude and, say, now it's your guys' job to pass down that knowledge to the next generation of riders, but, to see them succeed, like, Jack, enduro world champ, and, Dean still killing it, and, all those guys like, so many young guys like Jackson Frew and all these guys that were, Connor and Troy, just seeing them, succeeding at it and having that experience as a racer, it's just, it's just so cool, and they're such all good guys, and then, the guys who don't have those pro careers, you're still friends with them on Facebook and Instagram, and you see them kind of just developing as humans, getting apprenticeships and, succeeding in other areas of life, which is, just as important, and you just, so to see that as well, it's just awesome, it's, it's really cool.
What was,
it's just their job now to pass it on to the next generation.
Yeah, exactly. What were, I guess we kind of skipped over, but what were some of the biggest things that you would have taught them, or you noticed that people from Australia might be underprepared for when they're heading towards a World Cup or World Champs or overseas to race?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things with, like, when you're talking like World Cups compared to Australian racing, like there's nothing that really you can prepare for, because it is just so gnarly and so different. Mm-hmm. So, you try to get that as much exposure to it as you can through, your trips and things like that. But on the back end, like the importance of training, like we were speaking about before in that example of, how much improvement you can make by being fit, and how important that is for your strength and conditioning to be able to look at downhill not just as a race, but as a race at the end of the 2-day marathon of training and everything else. And how important structured training is. Nutrition as well is such a big part. Why you have to eat. If you're going to the gym and you don't eat afterwards, you basically wasted that gym training session. Just those little things that are so important to training. Things like active recovery and what you can do to recover, and also just an understanding of how much work it actually does take to get there. Because if guys are saying, "Oh, I just ride my bike every day," what do? I just go out and ride. I'm like, no, you got to go out with it. You got to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, and focus on those key elements. And there's time to have fun and do everything else like we did all the time back in the day. But if you can combine that with the right amount of training and structure, that's when you're going to see your biggest kind of gains and benefits. I guess the other really important thing too is recognizing your weaknesses where you do need to improve, because naturally you see with a lot of the younger riders, they know they have a weakness, but because it's so hard to work on a weakness, whether be it fitness or certain elements of your racing, if you can focus on that, that's where you're going to see your biggest gains 100%. So, it's kind of looking at it as a holistic approach, understanding what you need to focus on and building your plan from there. So
do you think there's like an aspect where sometimes talented riders kind of don't want to or forget to work as hard as some of these guys that are now at the top, and that's the difference really? Because you can have the most talented riders in the world, but if they don't work hard, then the people that work hard will just outride the talent.
Yeah, no, that is like massively important, because the reality is at the end of the day, when you're 16, 17, 18, you can kind of rely on that talent, but, everyone's going to catch up to you eventually. And then it becomes a matter of, then you go from talking seconds to talking tenths of seconds as well. Like we said, I don't think a lot of people don't realize just how much work you do need to put in. And quite often you see the athletes with the best work ethic. You just really need that work ethic to be able to go out and do it. And that's where you see those athletes succeed. Like a good example is Jack Moyer. He's got like such an incredible work ethic. And you're kind of looking at Jack and seeing him ride his YouTube videos and everything else. That really doesn't shine through, but the reality is he's one of the most dedicated guys to training I ever came across. We had a program for him once, and it had instead of doing a core session, I'd say go because he used to like right into his surfing, and say, well, rather than doing a core session in the morning, his surfing's probably just as good. So had one day, and I said, all right, so one day on his program was a core session in the afternoon, and then a 2-hour cross country ride in the afternoon. And he calls me up and goes, "Hey man, I went surfing and then I did my 2-hour cross country ride. So can I go downhilling this afternoon?" I was like, "Yeah, man, you can go downhilling." Like that's what you need to do. And so, you know what I mean? Like he just wanted to ride, but he's got his training to do, so he gets that done first, and then for fun he goes downhill. And like that's just that's that's work ethic right there.
That's next level, yeah. And yeah, very, very underrated, his work ethic for sure. Especially to transform himself from a downhill rider to an enduro racer and win the enduro within like a year and a half. Like it's insane.
Yeah. And then, he was always good on like long tracks. You'd look at his splits when he was a junior and he'd always get faster down the track.
Yeah, right.
And I would always thought like, man, if there was a 10-minute downhill track, this guy would kill it, So when he started racing enduro, I remember thinking, oh, man, he's going to go good at this. But yeah, like it just blew everyone's mind, I think, with how well he did. It was awesome.
He's got this unique Did you notice, like, straight off the bat, his kind of unique riding style of his torso being able to move wherever it wanted, and the bike could just dance underneath him while he just seems to have the longest arms and legs and manages to swing about in that bike. It's quite unique.
Yeah, no, he's got a pretty unique style, but yeah, it's awesome to watch. He's just so, like, just the way he drifts in the corners and stuff. Like, I love watching his videos these days. Like, it gets me psyched to ride. But yeah, like, it's such a unique, awesome style. He's got kind of that tall guy style on the bike. You kind of see that with, like, guys like Rennie and Petey too back in the day. Minar as well. I think there's probably some. I think to a certain degree, there's some benefit being a tall downhiller because you've got more arms and legs and body suspension to work with.
Yeah,
to move around.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's so good about ride like downhill is both have their pros and both have their cons, and they end up being quite equal in my eyes. Because you look at Troy, who's so damn light, he just skips over everything, and he doesn't need the suspension as much. So, yeah, true. Yeah. And I mean, there's another rider who has, like, a phenomenal work ethic. Like, Troy's just unbelievable, it's just awesome to see all the different styles of all the all the different styles. It's just awesome to watch, and Connor's style as well. Like, that's just, and any Conniferent edit that pops up, it's like, it's always a banger. Like, it's so good. Always ridiculous. What do you think about the current? I mean, you've been out of the sport for a bit now. You mentioned, like, you're working the day job and you've kind of pursued other avenues down the track. But what's it like looking from the outside in at the sport now? And what do you think is different for the younger guys trying to make it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the sport definitely is a lot more professional these days. Like, it's covered by Red Bull TV. There's so much coverage with social media. I think for guys coming up, and there's probably so much, not being in the whole realms of social media, but I imagine there's a lot more kind of obligations with regards to social media and doing all that side of it as well. I think these days really teams are going to be looking for, true professionals, and they want to see that, that work ethic and the guys coming up that they're investing in are going to, give a return on the money that they're investing, because it's, costs so much to send a rider for a full World Cup season. I think that heightened level, like, I think the professionalism that's in the sport now is just, above and beyond what it's ever been. And, the times are tighter than ever. And it's, there's much less of an equipment gap. Like, there's guys winning on all brands of tyres and all brands of bikes and all kinds of suspension, so it really, so much of it's going to come down to the athlete and what they're capable of as well.
Yeah, I've never thought of
I think, for guys,
never thought of the equipment gap. Like, yeah, you're right. Like, everyone's on these bikes that handle everything so well, so it does just come down to the athlete. It's it's a very important point.
Yeah, it is. And I think teams are going to be looking for riders who are adaptable. And when I think when the sport's that tight, you're always going to be looking for advantages and trying new things and testing and, trying to find that next advantage and developing new tyres and bikes and suspension and all the rest. So, I think they're going to be looking for guys who are professionals and team players and, and you've got guys out there who have their own kind of, their own little quirks and their own personalities and stuff, which you see come through social media, which is awesome. But I can guarantee that all those guys at the end of the day just put their head down and work so hard to get where they are and maintain where they are too,
100%.
Because they don't want some young buck knocking them off their perch.
Yeah. I mean, look at the world's fastest podcaster, Dean. Like, he's putting so much work into his podcast and all his media and doing all that type of thing, but still has to maintain that professional level as an athlete, which is quite admirable to look at how much work he has to do for both. It's pretty epic. And I mean, when you mention work ethic, you gotta look at names like Buchanan as well. Like, her work ethic is through the roof, and what she offers brands is next level. And that's why these guys have big sponsors and out of industry sponsors as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you got to remember at the end of the day, your primary job as a racer is to sell bikes.
Yes,
so,
exactly.
That's it at the end of the day. So, you can do it through results, you can do it through other means, and, finding that balance of what works for you and your personality and who you are. And it's awesome to see, guys like Dean branching out into his podcast and doing other things, and it's something I'd say to any athlete that's coming up. It's like, don't forget, racing doesn't last forever. So you've got other time there too. So, do some stuff for yourself as well, whether it's study or something else, but you've got that time. So, think about the future too, for sure.
Yeah. And that's a good note to mention. Like, you've been out of the sport for quite a few years now we're out of the industry and out of the professional side of things. What was the transition like from going from, traveling the world, being a coach, being a part of this huge sport, to going to the office job and the 9-to-5 grind? And I'm kind of assuming that, but what was the transition like for you?
Yeah, it's definitely it was definitely different. Like, I definitely missed racing and everything that goes with it. But at the same time, I kind of did it for so long that I was almost happy to transition to something else. Or I was, it's yeah, at the end of the day, you kind of get to the point you're like, man, I can't do this forever. Like, unless you're Kurt Voorhees. Yeah. But for me, I just had some opportunities. Yeah, or Manar, far out. There's another one. Jeez. Or Petey.
Yeah, true.
I guess maybe you can. Maybe I need to train.
He's just fueled on beer, though. Like, he's a different breed. Yeah. Yeah, no, but for me, it was, I had a couple of good opportunities, and, I just kind of took them and ran with them, really. And I guess I was so busy doing that, I kind of didn't really notice, and still got out to ride every now and then. And when I could, and I still love riding when I can get out. But, I've got a wife now, an 8-year-old daughter, and, at the end of the day, your family comes first, and seeing my daughter ride a bike or going for a ride with my wife, that's still, to me, just comes down to that love of riding. And when we do get out, it's awesome, So, so it's definitely a change, and you kind of miss the racing and that excitement of racing, because, racing gives you a kind of level of excitement that you just can't, you can't replicate with anything, that feeling you get before a race, and that, the feeling you get, especially when you finish and you've done well, and, you can't, there's nothing that beats that. But you can't do it forever. So, you ever have, like, I guess now you're in this day-to-day job and world and stuff, and people ask what your history is or something like that. What's it like telling people that may not know about sport or may have absolutely no idea who you are or what you've done? What's it like saying, I used to just travel the world and race bikes and get up to mischief? Like, that's going to create some kind of weird moments, or,
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Like, because I don't normally mention it, but people go, what'd you do before before you were doing events and stuff? I was like, I race mountain bikes. Like, that must have been like, but what'd you do? I was like, no, I raced mountain bikes. That was my job for a while. I was a pro cyclist. And I go, oh, really? And then, I was like, yeah, no, did you go to the Olympics? Like, no, I raced downhill mountain bikes. It wasn't in the Olympics. Oh, did you jump off those cliffs? No, I didn't jump off any cliffs. It's racing. you race from the top to the bottom. So people have this kind of view of what mountain biking is these days, and like the whole Red Bull thing and social media has been so good for mountain biking, but most people don't really understand downhill racing. So they go, oh, that's really cool. So, but do you jump off big cliffs? Can you do a backflip? Pretty boring. You just race from the top to the bottom as fast as you can.
Yeah, I went 70K plus giant trees that wanted to kill me, but yeah, didn't jump off any cliffs.
Yeah. But I think, and then maybe people see like, when people come back to you and they see like, a helmet cam footage of something, because I think helmet cams are probably the best thing ever, or GoPros are probably the best thing ever for mountain biking, because it just is one of those sports that looks so good on a GoPro. So when people see that, they go, oh wow, that's really cool, like it's so it's it's pretty funny.
Yeah. 100%. Like that's so good. And the Olympics comment, it's the best. It's the best.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I remember my mum asked me that about 2005. So I said, can you go to the Olympics? Like, no, mum, I race downhill. It's not in the Olympics.
It should be in the Olympics, but it's not in the Olympics.
Yeah, then who knows? I mean, you can only imagine what would happen to the sport if it did. It would, it'd take it to a whole other level.
Yeah,
I think.
it would get funding. It'd be amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, all sports funding is focused on Olympic medals, so it would. Yeah, and as good as sport, you'd probably see a whole lot of funding thrown at it. It'd be a pretty exciting time, I reckon, if it did happen. Fingers crossed it does.
100%. What is it like being in a different sport industry and seeing how everything's managed on that side compared to mountain biking? That's something that's always intrigued me because I've never seen it from the other side.
Yeah, so it's pretty. So I work with venues and events. So deal with rugby league and Super Rugby and rectangular, anything that happens at a rectangular stadium, really. So looking back at mountain biking events, I guess kind of my take on it is you kind of seeing how much money then there is with kind of mainstream sports, and then you look back at mountain biking, and I don't know, I think in some ways you kind of sometimes it's we've got a national series and everything like that that's here, and it's it seems like it's not potentially what it was in its heydays, but I think at the end of the day we're really lucky to have those events to go to, and like people make comments like, oh, it should be on TV, it should be this, needs more funding, but the reality is with mountain biking, when there's just not that funding there for it, not without that kind of stuff. So I think it's it'd be awesome to see the sport bigger and succeeding and doing having more exposure in Australia, but at the same time there's been such a shift away from racing towards things like social media and other things that sell bikes just as well as racing. I think it's just having that opportunity to you need it. You need races here, and to get kids into the sport and have that opportunity to progress like like I did and all the guys now did. So I really take my hat off to some of the guys who run those smaller races, and they're not making a whole bunch of money out of it, and they're doing it with small teams, and it's just awesome that they're doing it and people have that opportunity. It'd be awesome to see some bigger events come back to Australia, like World Cups and things like that. I saw we've got there's going to be a Crankworks in Cairns, which is awesome.
Yep, huge.
But at the end of the day, you need the dollars to do it. And so if the dollars aren't there, then it's going to be really hard. But there's still that passion there that you see with the guys who organise those small races and the guys who go and everything. And that's just awesome to see.
Yeah, it's the greatest volunteer on sport in the world by far.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
The fact that volunteers are running national cups and national series events is still mind-blowing, and it's still the way they do it and the way they manage to get it to the level it is phenomenal.
yeah, and you got to take your hat off to those guys. Like they're doing it, and by doing it, they're giving up and coming racers an opportunity to progress to that next level. Because without those guys, there'd be nothing.
Yeah.
So it's just to everyone out there who's volunteering and working at races and doing your thing, like it's just keep doing it, because it's you guys who are giving those young guys the opportunity to be the next Nathan Rennies and Sam Hills and and Jack Moyers and Dean Lucases and everyone, Troy Brosmans and everyone, and inspire that next young, that next cohort of young racers, because without those guys, it's going to be really tough. And racing at the end of the day is like races, kind of, there's a lot at the top and then it tapers down really quick. So you get a lot of focus on World Cups and things like that. And
yeah,
I think every country probably has that same, those same issues with domestic races and the like. But yeah, maybe when downhill makes the Olympics, it'll all change.
Yeah, exactly. Sweet. I think we might start wrapping things up a bit here. We've kind of gone through everything. It's kind of 3 questions I like to ask at the end of every podcast. First one being is, what advice would you have to anyone that wants to go overseas and race World Cups or take it to the next level like you did?
Just work your ass off, think about, you just work as hard as you can at it. I've heard some of the best sayings I've ever heard have been from parents, actually. One of them was, you've got to train hard so you get lucky. Another one was, you've got to study hard so you can afford to be a pro racer.
Yeah.
And, yeah, but at the end of the day, it just comes down to work ethic, focus on your weaknesses, work hard, and take every opportunity you can to learn.
Yeah, I rate that. I like that. Work hard enough and you'll get lucky.
It's true.
It's so good. Is there anything you regret or would have done differently up till now?
Oh man, in hindsight, I would have done a million things differently. I would have invested in Bitcoin when it was $1.
Yeah, not now when it's just tanking, but yeah.
Oh, look, regret's a funny thing. You learn from, you can always look back and do things better and differently, but, at the end of the day, it's the lessons learned are the most important thing. The definition of stupid is doing the same thing twice and expecting a different result. So,
I know.
Try not to make the same mistake twice. Look, as far as regrets, I'll look back at it and, it was an amazing time. And yeah, sure, there's stuff I would have changed and done differently, but, I think that's made me a better person in the long run. So, maybe trained a little bit harder in those early days, which would have got me off to a better, maybe some better results early on, which might have carried through a bit better. But, at the end of the day, I had a ball back then.
Those 39-cent hamburgers were just too good. You had to...
Oh, man. No, I'll never forget.
And last question I like to ask, it seems to be the hardest for a lot of people, but when you're lacking a bit of motivation or don't want to get out and do the hard work, or, you just need that extra motivation, is there any music or anything you like to listen to? And if not, what kind of motivates you to get out and get it done?
Well, as far as music goes, I reckon I've got a terrible taste in music, but if I'm going out for a ride, it can be anything from country to old school Limp Bizkit or something. So depends on the mood. But yeah, lately I like to listen to some Limp Bizkit, remind me of the old days.
It's funny because I was literally doing that on Friday last week, I think. And some old Limp Bizkit for some reason just came into my head.
That's awesome, man. It's okay to like Limp Bizkit. They weren't that
I'm
bad.
okay with it, yeah.
Yeah. Rap rock's going to make a comeback one of these days. But No, I like to listen to some country. I've been listening to a lot of the Gords lately, which is a kind of bluegrass country band. They do a great cover of Gin and Juice by Snoop Dogg.
Yeah, right.
Hank Williams III is always good. And then just, whatever else. Normally I just, put on something that I like and hit the radio and go with that on Spotify.
You wouldn't be a Canberra if you didn't
as
say country either. I think everyone I've had from Canberra is full country. So I think that's funny.
Oh, really? I thought I was the only one. Oh, there you go. And as far as, what motivates, I guess, I don't know. At the end of the day, you just got to, once you get started, everything's a lot easier once you get started. So it's always just taking that first step to get started. So if you don't feel like going for a ride, just force yourself to get out the door. And once you get out there and throw some Limp Bizkit on, it's not all that bad.
Yeah. That's too good. On that note, what a better note to finish on. Thanks so much for coming on and doing this. I really appreciate it. And it's been really interesting, even with a few technical difficulties at the start. It's been really, really cool to listen to your story and listen to your chat.
No, thanks, man. And once again, really appreciate it. And it's great to get to meet you. And thanks for having me.
Perfect. Easy, mate. Well, I'll let you get to it. It's getting late up your end, so I'll let you get to the rest of your night, and we'll chat soon. Easy, mate. There we go. Thanks so much for listening to the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Bunch of cool little chats in there. Bunch of cool things that I never knew about. And man, I'm so stoked to finally get to sit down with Rando. As I mentioned at the top of the podcast, thanks to Trek, FE Sports, NS Dynamics, Taylor Trails, Lead Out Sports, Franked, Dirt Surfers, Crush, and Fist for all supporting the podcast and keeping this thing going. If you want to support the podcast, jump over to beyondthetape.com, grab some merch, I don't know, read some articles I've written, just have a browse. Buy me a coffee. Good way to support the podcast if you don't want some t-shirts. And if you don't have money and you don't want to spend money, just tell your mates. Tell your mum, tell your dog, tell your cat, tell whoever, some random on the street. Tell them about podcast, share it around, and spread the love. Anyway, until the next one, have a bunch of fun.